On August 14th, 2022, at 9:47 in the morning, Marcus Chen was 712 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean when his side-scan sonar detected something that would change everything he thought he understood about human history. Marcus was 39 years old, a technical dive instructor with over 800 logged dives, certified in advanced trimix and rebreather operations since 2009. He was also a father of two, coached his daughter's soccer team on weekends, and volunteered 3 Saturdays a month at the Maritime Museum in Beaufort, where he helped restore artifacts from colonial-era shipwrecks. The kind of person who followed protocols, documented everything, never took unnecessary risks. Which is exactly why what he found 58 miles north of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, in international waters beyond the continental shelf, couldn't be explained away as diver error or equipment malfunction. Marcus had been contracted by the University of North Carolina's Marine Sciences Department to conduct geological mapping of the seafloor in the aftermath of Hurricane Florence. The storm had reshaped sections of the continental shelf, and the university wanted baseline data before applying for federal research grants. Standard work. He was diving from a 26-foot research vessel using a closed-circuit rebreather with a trimix blend of 10% oxygen and 50% helium to avoid nitrogen narcosis at depth. He had 3 dive computers running simultaneously, a 4K helmet camera, and full redundancy on every system. His dive plan called for a bottom time of 18 minutes at 712 feet, followed by a 4-hour and 47-minute ascent with mandatory decompression stops. Everything by the book. The sonar return came at 9:51 a.m., 4 minutes into his bottom time. The display showed a debris field spanning roughly 900 feet across the seafloor. More than 100 distinct metallic contacts, each ranging from 8 inches to 4 feet in length. Marcus's first thought was shipwreck, but the distribution pattern made no sense. Wreck debris clusters around impact sites, spreading in predictable dispersal patterns based on current and slope. These objects were arranged in perfect concentric circles, 7 rings total, with exactly 47 feet between each ring. Geometric precision that natural processes don't create. He adjusted his buoyancy and descended another 20 feet to get visual confirmation. The water at that depth held a permanent twilight, his dive lights cutting narrow tunnels through the darkness. When the first object came into view, Marcus felt his heart rate spike, despite the sedative effects of helium. It was a blade, roughly 14 inches long, lying partially embedded in sediment that his geology training told him was at least 3,000 years old, based on the compaction and mineral deposits. But the metal showed no oxidation. No rust, no corrosion, no degradation from 30 centuries of saltwater exposure. The blade caught his light and reflected it back with an almost mirror-like finish, as if it had been placed there yesterday. Impossible. Steel corrodes in seawater. Bronze develops patina. Even gold dulls. This metal looked freshly forged. Marcus began documenting, moving methodically through the debris field. Each object he examined showed the same impossible preservation. Blades with intact edges sharp enough to reflect light. Tools with handles that still showed fine detail work. Decorative patterns carved into surfaces that should have been worn smooth by millennia of current. Ornaments with interlocking parts that still moved freely when he carefully manipulated them. He photographed 23 separate artifacts before his helmet camera battery indicator dropped to 15%. Protocol said surface at 10%. He marked the GPS coordinates in all 3 dive computers: 35 degrees, 23 minutes north, 75 degrees, 31 minutes west. Then he began his ascent, already knowing that what he'd found would either make his career or end it. Before beginning his ascent, Marcus made a decision that would later seem either brilliant or catastrophic, depending on who was telling the story. Archaeological protocol in international waters permitted collection of small artifacts for scientific analysis, provided they were properly documented and reported to relevant authorities within 30 days. He selected 3 objects, each small enough to fit in his sample bag without disrupting the site's integrity. The first was a blade fragment, 6 inches long, with what appeared to be a tang for handle attachment. The second was a circular ornament, roughly 3 inches in diameter, with geometric patterns etched into its surface. The third was a tool of some kind, possibly a punch or awl, with a worked point on one end and clear signs of impact wear on the other. He sealed them in separate specimen bags, logged their exact positions in his dive computer, and started up. The ascent was meditation and torture in equal measure. 4 hours and 47 minutes of hanging at predetermined depths, while his body slowly off-gassed the helium and nitrogen absorbed during his bottom time. At 600 feet, he stopped for 11 minutes. At 480 feet, another 15 minutes. At 300 feet, 22 minutes. The decompression schedule was calculated by algorithms that balanced tissue saturation against the risk of forming bubbles in his bloodstream, bubbles that could paralyze or kill him if he surfaced too quickly. So Marcus hung in the water column, watching his dive computers count down the minutes, his mind replaying everything he'd seen on the seafloor, trying to find a rational explanation that fit the evidence. He couldn't. Metal doesn't stay pristine for 3,000 years in salt water. It corrodes, it oxidizes, it breaks down at the molecular level, unless it wasn't metal as he understood it, unless it was something else entirely. He surfaced at 6:34 in the evening, the sun already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. His dive partner Cole Mitchell was waiting at the swim platform, already reaching down to help him aboard. Cole was 42, former Navy SEAL who'd transitioned to commercial diving after 15 years of service, the kind of person who could disassemble and reassemble a rebreather blindfolded, and had pulled Marcus out of 2 equipment failures over the years. They'd worked together for 6 years, trusted each other's judgment without question. Marcus handed up the sample bag first, then his fins, then hauled himself onto the platform with Cole's help. The rebreather rig weighed 83 pounds dry, closer to 90 after a 4-hour dive. Marcus felt every pound of it as he shrugged out of the harness. "You were down there almost 6 hours, Cole said, already checking Marcus's dive computers, verifying the decompression schedule had been followed. "Find something interesting?" Marcus pointed at the sample bag. Cole opened it, pulled out the first artifact, the blade fragment, and his expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. He turned it over in his hands, held it up to catch the fading sunlight. "This came from 700 feet down? In sediment you said was 3,000 years old?" Marcus nodded. Cole was silent for a long moment, examining the blade's edge, the way light reflected off its surface without any sign of corrosion or pitting. "This looks like it was forged last week," he finally said. "I know," Marcus replied. They spent the next 40 minutes documenting everything. Photographs from multiple angles, measurements with digital calipers, weight on a precision scale. The blade fragment weighed 7.4 ounces but felt heavier, denser than it should be for its size. The circular ornament was even more pronounced, 4.1 ounces in a package that should have weighed maybe 1.5 ounces based on its dimensions. The tool was the heaviest of the 3, 9.8 ounces, almost 3 times what Marcus expected. Cole ran the calculations twice, thinking he'd made an error. "Specific gravity is way off," he said. "This stuff is at least 3 times denser than it should be. What the hell is it made of?" That's when Marcus made the call. Dr. Rachel Klein, planetary geologist at Duke University, specialist in meteoric composition and impact geology. Marcus had worked with her 2 years earlier on a project analyzing iron samples from a suspected meteorite impact site off the coast of Virginia. She'd been thorough, skeptical, and brutally honest about data interpretation, exactly the kind of scientist Marcus needed right now. He reached her on the third ring, explained what he'd found in broad terms, kept the details vague over an open phone line. Rachel asked 3 questions. How deep? What's the sediment age? What's the specific gravity? Marcus answered all 3. There was a pause on the line that stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if the call had dropped. Then Rachel's voice came back, stripped of its usual casual tone. "I'm coming out there. Don't touch those samples with your bare hands. Don't clean them. Don't let anyone else see them. I'll be there in 3 hours." She arrived in 2 hours and 15 minutes, touching down on the research vessel's small helipad in a chartered helicopter that normally would have cost $3,000 an hour to operate. The trip from Duke's campus in Durham to Hatteras was normally a 4-hour drive, followed by a boat ride to wherever Marcus's vessel was positioned. Rachel had cut that time nearly in half, and Marcus didn't ask how or who was paying for the helicopter. She came aboard carrying a hard case that contained what she called her field kit, a portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometer that could analyze elemental composition without damaging the sample. She was 41, had published 73 peer-reviewed papers on meteoric geology, and currently looked like someone who'd just confirmed their worst suspicion. She set up the spectrometer on the vessel's small laboratory table, calibrated it against known standards, then analyzed each artifact in sequence. The blade fragment took 4 minutes to scan. The ornament took 3. The tool took 5 because Rachel ran it twice, not believing the first result. When she finished, she sat back from the equipment and looked at Marcus, with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Professional uncertainty, mixed with something that might have been fear. "This composition doesn't exist on Earth," she said quietly. "The ratio of iridium to osmium to platinum matches what we find in type IVA metallic meteorites. Nickel-iron alloys formed in the cores of planetoids that were destroyed billions of years ago, before Earth even finished forming. But those meteorites are raw material, unprocessed, irregular. These artifacts show tool marks, intentional design, functional purpose. Someone fabricated these objects using material from an asteroid core 3,000 years ago, before anyone on Earth should have had the technology to even mine meteorite material, let alone forge it into tools and ornaments." Cole had been standing quietly in the corner of the lab, listening. Now he spoke up. "So what are you saying? That someone 3,000 years ago had access to meteorite material and metalworking techniques sophisticated enough to process it?" Rachel shook her head. "I'm saying someone fabricated these objects from the core of a destroyed planetoid, using processes that require temperatures and pressures we can barely achieve with modern industrial equipment. And then those objects ended up on the seafloor off North Carolina, arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, preserved without any sign of degradation for 30 centuries. None of that should be possible. But here we are, looking at physical evidence that it happened." Marcus felt the boat rock slightly as the evening wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn echoed across the water. Normal sounds from a normal world that suddenly felt a lot less certain than it had been that morning. "So what do we do now?" he asked. Rachel was already packing up her spectrometer, moving with quick, efficient motions. We document everything. We report this to NOAA and the State Department. And we let people who know more than us figure out what it means. She paused, meeting Marcus's eyes. And we don't talk about this to anyone else until we understand what we're dealing with. Because if I'm right about what this is, a lot of very powerful people are going to be very interested in keeping it quiet. She was right about that part. But she had no idea how fast those powerful people would move, or how far they were willing to go to maintain their silence. Marcus woke at 6:15 the next morning to the sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the dawn air. He'd slept on the research vessel, which wasn't unusual for multi-day operations this far offshore, but the sound brought him up from his bunk with the immediate awareness that something was wrong. Commercial helicopters didn't operate this far out at this hour unless it was an emergency. Coast Guard helicopters did, but only for search and rescue operations or law enforcement. Marcus climbed topside to find Cole already there, watching a gray and white Coast Guard MH-60 Jayhawk circling their position at about 300 feet. "They've been up there for 10 minutes, Cole said. "Haven't made radio contact, just circling." Marcus was about to respond when his marine radio crackled to life. "Research vessel at position 35 degrees, 23 minutes north, 75 degrees, 31 minutes west. This is Coast Guard Station, Elizabeth City. Prepare to receive boarding party." The cutter arrived at 7:22 in the morning, a 110-foot patrol boat that must have left port hours earlier to reach their position 58 miles offshore. Marcus had never reported his location on any open channel. His communications with the university had been through encrypted email, his position logged only in his personal dive computers and the vessel's GPS system. There was no reason for the Coast Guard to know exactly where he was, let alone respond with this level of resources. 6 personnel came aboard, led by someone who identified himself only as Agent Foster. No first name, no agency affiliation beyond flashing a federal badge too quickly for Marcus to read the details. Foster wore a Coast Guard uniform but with no rank insignia, no name tape, nothing that would identify him specifically. His team moved with practiced efficiency, spreading throughout the vessel while Foster approached Marcus with a document already prepared, already filled out with specifics about the artifacts that Marcus hadn't shared with anyone except Rachel. "Under the authority of the Antiquities Act of 1906, Foster said, his voice carrying the flat affect of someone who'd delivered this speech before, "I'm hereby confiscating all artifacts recovered from coordinates 35 degrees, 23 minutes north, 75 degrees, 31 minutes west, along with all documentation, photographs, and electronic records related to said recovery." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The Antiquities Act applies to federal lands and territorial waters. We're in international waters, 58 miles offshore, beyond the 12-mile limit. Foster's expression didn't change. The act has been invoked under national security provisions that supersede territorial limitations. You can cooperate now, or we can discuss this with federal prosecutors later. Your choice. Cole stepped forward, putting himself between Foster and Marcus. "We have a right to know what legal authority you're operating under. Show us the warrant, show us the specific statute you're invoking, or get off our vessel." One of Foster's team members moved closer, hand resting casually on a holstered sidearm. Foster held up one hand in a calming gesture that somehow made the situation feel more threatening. "This isn't a negotiation. The artifacts represent a national security concern that you don't have clearance to understand. We're taking the samples, the computers, the cameras, and all GPS data. You'll both sign non-disclosure agreements. You'll receive compensation for your cooperation, and this matter will be closed. Or we can do this the difficult way, which involves federal charges for unauthorized removal of protected antiquities, interference with a national security investigation, and about 6 other statutes I can invoke if you make me." Marcus looked at Cole, saw the same calculation running behind his eyes. They could resist, and they'd lose. Foster had the authority, the manpower, and apparently the legal framework to take whatever he wanted. Fighting would accomplish nothing except putting them in a worse position. The confiscation took 43 minutes. Foster's team bagged the 3 artifacts with the kind of careful handling that suggested they knew exactly what they were taking. They collected all 3 of Marcus's dive computers, his helmet camera, his backup GoPro, the vessel's main GPS unit, and both laptops he'd brought aboard. They photographed the spectrometer Rachel had used, asked detailed questions about her analysis, and seemed disappointed when Marcus explained she'd taken the device with her when she left the previous evening. Foster made a phone call, speaking too quietly for Marcus to hear, then turned back with new instructions. "Dr. Rachel Klein. She's been invited to a consultation at NOAA's facility in Norfolk, Virginia. She'll be transported there this morning. When she returns, I suggest you follow her advice about discretion regarding this matter." The way he said "invited" made it clear Rachel didn't have much choice in the matter. The Coast Guard vessel departed at 8:09, leaving Marcus and Cole standing on deck watching it disappear toward the northwest. Marcus felt a familiar weight in his pocket, the one thing Foster's team hadn't found because they hadn't thought to check his personal phone. Cloud backup. Every photograph he'd taken, every measurement he'd recorded, automatically uploaded to encrypted storage the moment his phone had synced the previous evening. He'd built the habit after losing 6 months of research data to a hard drive failure in 2015. Now that paranoia might be the only thing standing between the truth and complete suppression. Cole must have been thinking along the same lines because he looked at Marcus and said quietly, "You backed everything up, didn't you?" Marcus nodded. "Good, because something about this feels very wrong, and I don't think Foster wants us finding out why." Rachel returned 12 hours later, arriving by commercial boat service from Hatteras, her expression carefully neutral in a way that told Marcus everything he needed to know before she said a word. They met in the small cabin below deck, away from any possible surveillance. Though Marcus suspected if Foster's people wanted to listen, they had the capability regardless of where they talked. Rachel sat down heavily, looking like someone who'd just been shown something that fundamentally altered their understanding of reality. "They have a facility," she said quietly. "Underground, beneath the NOAA building in Norfolk. I met people whose job titles don't officially exist, who showed me analysis data from 73 other artifact sites around the world. Marcus, what you found isn't unique. It's part of a pattern that's been documented since the 1970s. And they've been keeping it classified for 50 years. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "They offered me a position, full funding, unlimited resources, access to the complete data set. All I have to do is sign documentation that essentially makes me disappear into their program. No publications, no public acknowledgement of my work, complete compartmentalization from everyone I know outside the project." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Are you going to take it?" Rachel met his eyes, and he saw genuine conflict there, the kind of decision that would define the rest of her career one way or another. "They gave me 72 hours to decide. But, Marcus, they were very clear about one thing. This matter is closed for you. No further investigation, no public disclosure, no attempts to analyze the data you collected. They used the phrase Leave it alone 6 times in our 3-hour conversation. I'm telling you this as a friend. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. But Marcus was already thinking about it, already planning his next moves, because Rachel's warning contained information she probably hadn't meant to reveal. 73 other sites. A pattern documented since the 70s. A program so classified it operated out of unmarked facilities beneath federal buildings. If Foster and his people were this concerned about Marcus finding one site, it meant the larger pattern was something they desperately needed to keep hidden. And that meant it was something worth finding. He started the research that evening using encrypted connections through VPN services that routed his traffic through 3 different countries. Basic digital security that wouldn't stop a determined federal investigation, but might buy him time before Foster's people noticed what he was doing. He searched for reports of unusual underwater discoveries, focusing on deep water sites beyond recreational diving limits. He cross-referenced locations with subsequent maritime restrictions, looking for patterns of government response. What he found over the next 4 days was both terrifying and illuminating. Lake Michigan, August 1994. Commercial salvage diver reported metallic debris field at 630 feet. Geometric arrangement? Samples collected. Area declared environmentally protected 6 weeks later. The diver's salvage license was suspended for unspecified violations 3 months after his discovery. Puget Sound, March 2003. Research team from University of Washington documented unusual sonar contacts at 708 feet. NOAA arrived within 24 hours, confiscated equipment, area restricted. Lead researcher left academia 6 months later, current whereabouts unknown. Iceland, June 2011. Private diving expedition found worked metal objects at 802 feet off the southern coast. Icelandic Coast Guard responded, artifacts confiscated. 2 members of the dive team died in separate diving accidents within 8 months. Japan, December 2018. Commercial fishing vessel reported sonar anomaly. Research dive confirmed metallic objects at 679 feet. Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force established exclusion zone. Lead divers business filed bankruptcy 4 months later. 4 incidents spread across 2 decades and 3 continents, all following the same pattern. Deepwater discovery, immediate government response, confiscation of evidence, subsequent restriction of the area, and consequences for the discoverers that ranged from professional destruction to death. Marcus tried to contact the surviving divers. 2 refused to speak with him entirely, their responses identical in phrasing, suggesting they'd been given specific instructions about what to say if contacted. The 3rd diver, from the Iceland expedition, agreed to a brief phone call. His voice shook when Marcus explained why he was calling. "I signed papers," the man said, his English heavily accented. "I cannot speak about what I found, but I tell you this, leave it alone. They know when you search for this information. They know when you contact people like me, and they will not allow you to interfere with what they are protecting." The line went dead before Marcus could ask what they were protecting or from whom. The pressure began 3 days after Rachel left. Marcus received an email from the University of North Carolina stating that his contract for seafloor mapping had been terminated, effective immediately, citing violations of research protocols that were never specified in detail. His professional liability insurance, maintained through the same carrier for 11 years, sent cancellation notice claiming they were exiting the commercial diving market, though their website still advertised policies for other divers. The IRS sent notification of a comprehensive audit of his personal and business finances for the previous 7 years, requiring documentation for every expense, every deposit, every transaction above $500. His bank called to inform him that his business line of credit had been frozen pending review of his account activity. Review that could take up to 90 days. None of it was explicitly connected to the artifacts or his research into the pattern. None of it had to be. The message was clear. Stop digging, or lose everything. Cole called him on the 8th day, voice tight with controlled anger. I just lost my commercial diving certification. Review board says there were safety violations on our last job, the one where you found the artifacts. They're suspending my ticket for 18 months, pending recertification that requires $40,000 in additional training I've already completed twice. Marcus, they're destroying my business because I was with you when you found those things. Marcus felt the guilt settle in his chest, like a physical weight. Cole had a family, 2 kids in college, a mortgage, and a career that had just been taken away because he'd been in the wrong place at the right time. I'm sorry, Marcus said, knowing it was inadequate. I never meant for this to happen. Cole was quiet for a long moment. I know you didn't, but I need you to understand something. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you're going to prove, it's not worth what they'll do to you if you keep pushing. I've worked with special operations. I've seen what happens when people cross lines that powerful entities have drawn. They don't arrest you. They don't charge you. They just systematically dismantle your life until you don't have the resources or the credibility to be a threat anymore. Let it go, Marcus. Please. But Marcus couldn't let it go. Because letting it go meant accepting that something fundamental about human history had been hidden for half a century, and anyone who tried to reveal it would be destroyed. It meant accepting that Foster's people had the power to rewrite reality for anyone who got too close to the truth. And Marcus had spent his entire adult life dedicated to uncovering truth from the depths, bringing hidden history back to light. He wasn't going to stop now, no matter what it cost him. Even if he should have. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning, 14 days after Foster's team had confiscated the artifacts. Marcus found it on his doorstep when he left for a morning run, a plain manila envelope with no return address, postmarked from Washington, D.C. 3 days earlier. Inside was a thumb drive. Nothing else. No note or explanation. Marcus brought it inside, made coffee, while he considered whether opening it was the smartest decision or the final mistake that would complete his destruction. He opened it anyway, because by that point he'd already lost his university contract, his insurance, and most of his professional reputation. What else did he have to lose, except the truth? The drive contained 47 documents, scanned pages from what appeared to be declassified military reports, though the classification markings had been redacted in a way that suggested whoever leaked this had been careful about protecting their identity. The header on every page read, Operation Deep Reach, United States Navy Special Projects Division, 1972 through 1979. Marcus started reading and didn't stop for 6 hours. What he learned in those documents rewrote everything he thought he understood about his discovery off Hatteras, and transformed it from an isolated anomaly into a piece of something vastly larger and infinitely more disturbing. Operation Deep Reach had been initiated in June of 1972 after a Soviet submarine accidentally discovered metallic debris at 690 feet in the Barents Sea. The Soviets reported their finding through normal military channels, which American intelligence intercepted and analyzed. Within 8 weeks, the Navy had dispatched deep-sea survey vessels to 43 locations around the globe, selected using criteria that the documents didn't fully explain, but appeared to involve magnetic field analysis and historical records of unusual weather patterns. What they found at 39 of those 43 locations was consistent. Metallic artifacts, hundreds per site, arranged in geometric patterns, composed of material-matching type IVA meteorites, preserved without degradation despite being submerged for approximately 3,000 years. The artifacts were always found in deep water, never shallower than 550 feet, never deeper than 830 feet. They were always arranged in concentric circles or geometric grids. And they were always located at points that, when plotted on a map, formed a perfect geodesic pattern around the Earth. The documents showed the mathematics. 47 confirmed sites, distributed across every ocean and several large lakes, positioned with precision that suggested deliberate placement according to a design that treated the planet as a three-dimensional grid. The sites were denser near magnetic poles, with 13 locations in Arctic waters and 11 in Antarctic regions. They thinned out toward the equator, but maintained mathematical relationships in their spacing that couldn't be coincidental. Someone, at some point in history, had placed these artifacts in a pattern that covered the entire globe. And the Navy had known about it for 50 years. But the really disturbing information came in a section of the report labeled Material Analysis and Origin Assessment, compiled by a team of metallurgists and planetary scientists in 1976. They had analyzed samples from 14 different sites, looking for variations in composition or signs of different source materials. What they found was uniformity. Every artifact from every site showed identical isotopic ratios of iridium, osmium, and platinum. Identical crystalline structures in the metal matrix. Identical trace elements that included compounds not found in Earth's crust. The conclusion was unavoidable. All the artifacts had been made from the same source material, a meteorite that should have been massive, probably 3 to 5 miles in diameter based on the total volume of worked metal they'd recovered. But there was no impact crater, no geological record of a strike that size occurring in the last 10,000 years, let alone 3,000 years ago when the artifacts had apparently been placed in the ocean. A meteorite that size hitting Earth at typical cosmic velocities, anywhere from 25 to 70 miles per second, would release energy equivalent to millions of megatons of TNT. It would create a crater 50 miles across, trigger global firestorms, throw enough debris into the atmosphere to block sunlight for years, cause mass extinctions. The kind of event that ends civilizations and gets recorded in geological strata forever. But there was no crater, no extinction event, no atmospheric debris layer, nothing. Which led the 1976 analysis team to a conclusion that Marcus had to read 3 times before he could fully process its implications. Their exact words, preserved in faded typewritten text on a page marked Top Secret, Special Access Required, were burned into his memory within minutes of reading them. Based on isotopic analysis and the absence of corresponding impact evidence, this assessment concludes that the artifacts were not manufactured from meteorite material after terrestrial impact. Rather, the artifacts were fabricated in space prior to atmospheric entry, using metalworking processes that require sustained high temperature and low gravity conditions. The meteorite did not impact Earth in conventional terms. It was deliberately decelerated, broken apart in controlled fashion, and its fragments were precisely placed at predetermined coordinates. This indicates technological capability far exceeding any known civilization from the relevant time period. Further analysis is required to determine origin and purpose, but current evidence suggests the artifacts served as markers or signal devices in a network of global scope. Marcus sat back from his computer screen, feeling like the floor had dropped away beneath him. The Navy had known for 50 years that someone with space-based technology had deliberately placed a network of signal devices around Earth 3,000 years ago. They'd known, and they'd kept it classified, kept it hidden, systematically suppressing every independent discovery and destroying the careers or lives of anyone who got too close to the truth. Foster wasn't protecting national security. He was protecting the most significant archaeological discovery in human history from ever becoming public knowledge. The question was why? What were they so afraid people would learn? The answer came on page 39 of the documents in a section dated February 1979, marked Final Assessment and Program Recommendations. The text was heavily redacted, entire paragraphs blacked out, but what remained was enough to make Marcus's hands shake as he read. Electromagnetic analysis of Site 7, Site 12, and Site 23 indicates artifacts are not inert. Low-frequency emissions detected at 0.003 Hz, below threshold of human hearing, but consistent across all three sites. Emissions began between December 1977 and March 1978. No emissions detected in previous surveys. Assessment concludes artifacts have activated or been activated by unknown trigger mechanism. Purpose of transmission unknown. Destination of transmission unknown. Program recommends immediate establishment of permanent monitoring stations at all 47 sites and complete suppression of public knowledge pending further analysis. Marcus read the date again. The artifacts had started transmitting in late 1977, approximately 5 years after the Navy first discovered them. Something had turned them on. Something had activated a network that had been dormant for 3,000 years, and the Navy's response had been to hide it, to build monitoring stations, to wait and watch, and keep the rest of the world ignorant of what was happening in the deep ocean. Marcus checked the calendar on his phone. He'd touched the artifacts on August 14th, 2022. Today was August 28th. 14 days. He wondered if touching them had done anything, if his discovery had triggered some new activation, if Foster's urgency had been about more than just suppressing information. His phone rang at 9:37 that evening, an unknown number with a Virginia area code. Marcus almost didn't answer, assuming it was another creditor or another federal agency calling to inform him of another way they were dismantling his life. But something made him pick up, and Rachel's voice came through, tight with stress and speaking quickly like she didn't have much time. "Marcus, I need you to listen and don't interrupt. I took the position. I've been working at the Norfolk facility for the past 10 days, and I've seen things I can't talk about, things that are covered by security oaths I will go to prison for violating. But you need to stop. You need to stop digging. Stop researching. Stop trying to figure this out. You're right about everything. The global network, the deliberate placement, all of it. But there's something else. The artifacts you found? They're transmitting. Started 48 hours after you brought them to the surface. Same low-frequency pattern we've detected at every other site, where artifacts have been disturbed. We don't know what they're saying, we don't know where the signal's going, but every time someone finds a new site and brings samples up, the transmission changes. It gets stronger, more complex, like it's building towards something. Marcus, whatever these things are, whatever they're for, they're not ancient relics. They're active, they're operational, and every time someone like you finds them, we wake them up a little more. So please, please stop before you wake up something we can't handle." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his darkened living room, holding a phone that had just delivered a message that should have terrified him into silence. Rachel had confirmed everything in the leaked documents, and added the one piece of information the 1979 report hadn't included. The artifacts weren't just transmitting. They were responding. Responding to discovery, responding to disturbance, responding to human contact. Building towards something over decades of gradual activation across 47 sites around the world. And Foster's people knew it, had known it for 50 years, and had decided the best response was silence, suppression, and waiting. Waiting for what? For the transmission to complete? For whatever the artifacts were signaling to arrive? Or for humanity to forget that the network existed at all? Marcus had a choice to make. He could follow Rachel's advice, sign whatever documents Foster wanted, accept whatever compensation they offered, and spend the rest of his life knowing he'd helped bury the truth. Or he could go public with everything he had, burn every bridge, destroy whatever credibility remained, and force the world to confront what had been hidden in the deep ocean for 3,000 years. It wasn't really a choice at all. Marcus uploaded the video to YouTube at 2:13 in the morning on September 1st, 2022. 23 minutes of carefully edited footage showing his helmet camera recordings from the dive, the photographs of the artifacts in detail, the spectrometer readings Rachel had captured before Foster's team arrived, and scanned pages from the leaked Operation Deep Reach documents. He titled it, "What the Navy Found in 1972 and Why They're Still Hiding It." He set the video to public, posted the link on every maritime archaeology forum he could find, sent it to 36 journalists who covered science and technology, and then sat back to watch what happened. The view count started climbing immediately. 100 views in the first 10 minutes. 5,000 by dawn. 72 hours later, it had reached 4.2 million views, had been shared across every social media platform, and had sparked discussion threads that ranged from legitimate scientific debate to wild conspiracy theories about ancient astronauts. For 3 days, Marcus's discovery was the most talked-about story in online spaces dedicated to mysteries and unexplained phenomena. And then, at 9:47 p.m. on September 4th, the video disappeared. Not taken down with a copyright strike or terms of service violation. Just gone. Removed from YouTube's servers as if it had never existed. Marcus's channel was suspended with a notice that cited coordinated inauthentic behavior and violation of community guidelines, which was the same language YouTube used to remove state-sponsored disinformation campaigns. His backup channels, created in anticipation of exactly this kind of suppression, were suspended within minutes. The links he'd shared went dead. The forum posts were deleted by moderators who claimed they'd received legal notices from federal agencies. Within 12 hours of the video's removal, it had been essentially scrubbed from the internet, existing only in scattered screenshots and cached pages that wouldn't last long once the right people started making phone calls. Cole went public the next day, giving an interview to a regional news station in North Carolina, where he confirmed every detail of Marcus's story and showed his own photographs from the recovery operation. The interview aired once during the 6 p.m. news broadcast, got picked up by 2 national outlets, and then Cole's phone started ringing. His commercial diving certification was permanently revoked 3 days later, with the review board citing a previously undisclosed safety violation that conveniently made him ineligible for any future maritime work. His business insurance was canceled, his contracts were terminated, and his boat was seized by the IRS over unpaid taxes that Cole had actually paid, but somehow couldn't prove because the records had disappeared from both his accountant's files and the federal database. Within 2 weeks of going public, Cole had lost everything he'd built over 20 years of professional diving. He called Marcus once after that, his voice hollow with exhaustion and anger. "I hope it was worth it," he said. "Because they didn't just destroy my career, Marcus. They destroyed my life. And they did it so thoroughly that no one believes me when I try to explain what happened. I'm a cautionary tale now. The guy who fell for an internet hoax and lost everything. That's what they turned me into. A joke." Marcus faced his own choice 10 days after the video was removed. Foster appeared at his door with a briefcase full of documents, and an offer that was phrased as a choice, but felt like an ultimatum. Marcus could continue fighting, continue trying to spread information that would be suppressed at every turn, continue watching his life get systematically dismantled until he had nothing left but a reputation as a conspiracy theorist who'd faked evidence for attention. Or he could sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, accept a consulting position with a classified program that paid $78,000 per year, and spend the rest of his life knowing the truth, but never being able to share it. Marcus thought about his 2 kids, thought about college tuition and mortgage payments, and the reality that martyrdom looked a lot more noble in movies than it did in real life. He signed the papers. Foster left behind a banking authorization form and a phone number that Marcus was told to call if he ever felt tempted to break the agreement. "You'll receive monthly deposits," Foster said as he prepared to leave. "Consider it payment for your expertise, though I doubt we'll actually need to consult you on anything. This is what cooperation looks like, Mr. Chen. This is what happens to people who make the smart choice." Cheater. The money started appearing in Marcus's account on October 1st, 2022. $6,500 every month, deposited from an account registered to something called Atlantic Maritime Consulting Services, a company that didn't have a website or a physical address, or any employees besides Marcus. He's never been contacted for consultation. He's never been asked to provide expertise or analysis or input of any kind. The money just appears, every month without fail, a permanent reminder that he sold his silence and bought his family's security with the most important discovery of his professional life. He still dives occasionally, private recreational work that doesn't require certification or insurance, taking tourists out to shallow reefs where the most interesting thing they'll find is a sea turtle or a nurse shark. His daughter made the varsity soccer team. His son got accepted to 3 different colleges. His mortgage gets paid on time. Life goes on, normal and unremarkable. While 712 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, something continues transmitting. The area 58 miles north of Cape Hatteras remains an exclusion zone, 8 nautical miles in diameter, officially designated as protected marine habitat for endangered right whales. No commercial fishing, no recreational diving, no vessel traffic allowed without federal permits that are never issued. Satellite imagery shows consistent presence of NOAA research vessels in the area, typically 2 or 3 ships maintaining position at any given time. Documents leaked in late 2023, published on a whistleblower site, and quickly removed, described a permanent underwater installation constructed at 720 feet. A pressurized monitoring station that operates 24 hours a day with rotating crews that descend in specialized submarines. The station isn't there to study whales. It's there to watch the artifacts, to record their transmissions, to wait for whatever the Navy has been waiting for since 1979. Rachel still works at Duke University, still publishes papers on planetary geology and impact structures, carefully avoiding any mention of the one project that occupies 90% of her time. Marcus sees her name in academic journals occasionally, reads abstracts about meteorite composition and extinction event analysis, recognizes the careful way she dances around the truth without ever touching it directly. She called him once, 8 months after he signed the NDA, from a blocked number that showed up as unknown caller on his screen. They talked for less than 3 minutes, both of them knowing the conversation was probably monitored, but needing to say something anyway. "I think about it every day," she told him. "Every day I go into that facility and look at what we've learned, and I think about how the world deserves to know. But then I think about what knowing would change. And I'm not sure it would change anything except create panic we can't control. Maybe they're right to keep it quiet. Or maybe I'm just telling myself that so I can sleep at night." Marcus didn't have an answer for her. He still doesn't. The real twist came in February of 2024, buried in commercial satellite imagery that Marcus found while doing the kind of idle internet searching that had become his only connection to the work he used to do. High-resolution photographs of ocean surfaces around the world, provided by private satellite companies that sell their data to shipping firms and weather services. Marcus started checking the coordinates from the leaked Operation Deep Reach documents, looking at the locations where other artifact sites had been documented. What he found at every single one of the 47 sites was identical: vessel traffic, permanent presence, construction activity visible in infrared imaging that suggested underwater installations being built at multiple locations simultaneously. The pattern had expanded. Whatever the Navy had done off Cape Hatteras, they were now doing everywhere. 47 monitoring stations distributed around the globe in perfect geodesic arrangement, all constructed within the same 18-month period. The scale of the operation was staggering. The coordination required between multiple governments and agencies almost unimaginable. And it was happening right now, in 2024, not in response to a decades-old discovery, but in response to something urgent, something immediate, something that required a global response that no one was talking about publicly. Marcus keeps one photograph that he never shared, never uploaded, never showed to Foster or Rachel or anyone else. It's stored on an encrypted drive hidden in his garage, a close-up of the largest artifact he'd found, a blade fragment approximately 22 inches long with surface detail that wasn't visible in the wider shots. When he zooms in on the image, magnifying it to the point where individual crystals in the metal matrix become visible, he can see something etched into the surface. Microscopic symbols, thousands of them, arranged in patterns that look almost like circuit diagrams or mathematical notation. Rachel identified them once during their brief phone call, speaking quickly and quietly, like she was afraid of being overheard. "It's not language," she said. "It's math. Pure mathematics. Coordinate systems. Angles and vectors. We think they're navigation data. Approach trajectories. Like something you'd use to plot a course through three-dimensional space, accounting for orbital mechanics and gravitational effects. Marcus, the artifacts aren't markers for humans. They're beacons. They're signaling navigation data for something that's supposed to find them. And if they're transmitting now, after 3,000 years of silence, it means whatever they're calling is finally close enough to receive the signal." Marcus thinks about that conversation every time he looks at the photograph. He thinks about 47 sites around the world, all transmitting, all active, all sending their navigation data out into space towards something that was placed on Earth 3,000 years ago and has been waiting ever since. He thinks about the Navy's response, the desperate urgency to monitor every site, the global coordination that suggests every major government on Earth knows what's coming and is preparing for it in the only way they know how: by watching, by waiting, by keeping the rest of humanity ignorant of what the deep ocean has been trying to tell us since 1977. The artifacts have been transmitting for 47 years, growing stronger with each new discovery, each new activation, building toward some threshold or completion point that Foster's people understand but won't explain. And the question that keeps Marcus awake at night, the question that Rachel wouldn't answer and Foster would never acknowledge, is the simplest and most terrifying question of all. If the artifacts are transmitting navigation data after 3,000 years of dormancy, if they're calling something with the kind of precision you'd need to guide a craft through interplanetary space, if every government on Earth is building monitoring stations and maintaining constant surveillance of sites that were supposed to be ancient relics, then who are they transmitting to? And more importantly, when will they arrive?